nostalgia rages across the land, where everyone and their mother has a podcast, where there's still a movie trailer guy who says, in a world. Three friends revisit films, shows, and games that molded them as they search for answers to life, the universe, and everything in between. Settle in and join us for Screen Refresh.
Welcome back to Screen Refresh, a show where we revisit the films, shows, and games of our childhood, try to take another look at what we fell in love with. As always, I'm Tim, joined by the rest of the Screen Refresh crew, Nick and Dean.
Merry
there.
Christmas. Sorry.
Dean just can't hold back that holiday cheer.
It's usually Dean and Nick, I thought, but yeah, I know. So sorry. I didn't pay attention to the order when you said our names.
It depends on how much I ragged on Tim the last time. He puts my name second if he's feeling bitter.
That makes sense.
I go reverse alphabetical. I usually switch it up as often as I can to make sure that even when I put the little intro blurbs and like descriptions and things for episodes, we swap it up so the first person isn't always first in the names and the last person isn't always last. I don't want to slight anyone. There's arbitration letters that go out and things like that of who gets to be top billing on posters. So speaking of Dean's holiday cheer, we're doing a movie very near and dear to my heart. I know some people refer to it as a non-traditional holiday film. I think overall it is very Christmassy.
Super
we have
Christmassy.
Snow, we have trees, we have lights, we have discussions on Christmas, there's Christmas gifts. I think
it's a really good Santa Claus story.
Yeah, it's like, okay, maybe Die Hard or something, even that has some Christmas type things. I think this one's firmly a Christmas movie that just happens to be a little bit weirder. But that movie is 1984's Gremlins by Joe Dante. When was the first experience you guys had with this?
I don't remember. Honestly, the movie's just been there all my life.
Yeah, same. Probably just the HBO free preview weekend.
I don't remember seeing it for the first time. I remember going to daycare and there was like a rubber toy of Stripe, and I was terrified of it. And I remember my grandmother watching it and just seeing the scene of the pupa or whatever the scientist guy called it, the teacher. But like when it's in a cocoon stage, it creeped me out. And even remembering the sequel a couple years later with my uncle watching that, I'm like, God, there's a second movie. But then like watching it as an adult, I don't remember like the first time I wasn't afraid of it. It was just always there.
The eggs are much more effective than I remember because they are like almost like xenomorph eggs of this.
That's what I was going to say.
Goopy kind of, yeah. It's this weirdly organic look of just slime that I think otherwise as kids might have been a little creepier than what I remember in my memory looking back on it. But how about you, Dean?
I guess definitely more horror-y elements of the movie. Those pupae cocoons, the chrysalis. I'm with Nick. It's just for some reason just always was. I mean, I think a lot of childhood movies are like that. I can't pinpoint where I saw it. It's probably recorded, probably a VHS. I recorded a VHS. But I just remember liking it just fine as a kid. I don't remember being scared of it necessarily. Maybe I was. I mean, Gremlins do have their jump scare moments in here, and their design is not friendly looking.
This movie's not meant for kids.
No.
And it's not the first time they made a movie like that and turned it into one for kids. I remember watching it when I did this the other day. I can't remember the other movies that did it, but there's a few of them where the first one is not meant for kids, and then the sequel, absolutely, like Turtles is actually one example because they really made it more kid friendly. But I don't think that was the movie I was thinking of. But it was like a series of like 2 or 3 movies. The first one is so radically like darker and more adult, and then you get to the second one, and it's like kids are watching this now. You can't make it as adult, and you need to kind of dumb it down a little bit so the kiddies can watch it.
Yeah, I think the second one is definitely goofier overall. I mean, like the Key and Peele skit Gremlins 2, not inaccurate. It really seems like everybody just went around a table and just made up a gremlin. But it's still fun. It still has that certain
I forgot about
sensibility
that skit.
about it.
It's I'm just playing the whole thing in my mind right now.
Well, it's just amusing also because it's like all this wackiness, and then it's like, but don't worry, none of it's going to be in the final movie. And then it's just like all of this was in the final movie. So at some point we'll end up doing Gremlins too.
I want to watch this later. I haven't seen it.
It's pretty good. I don't know that I've seen Gremlins 2 in its entirety, like start to finish. Maybe when I was much younger, but I barely remember that movie. I remember a spider gremlin and a female Greta the gremlin. Then what's that? Film critic makes a
vegetable
cameo.
gremlin, Hulkster. It's another one that at some point we'll end up choosing, but this one, seen as it is very Christmas based, right around the holidays. 2 is definitely not. That's just kind of like I don't even know when it takes place. It's just like a very different feel entirely, since it takes place in the giant corporate building headquarters, which seemed like a kind of a cool place to work, since it had like its own mall essentially inside of it, plus its TV studio, plus it's like all this other stuff, plus its lab. It just seems kind of like a cool place, even though they're supposed to be pitching it as like the soulless corporate entity.
That place, Universal Studios.
It just like pans out a little bit farther and you're like, oh. But is the Jaws ride working? So 1984's Gremlins by Joe Dante. Everybody between this show and the other show, Don't Open This Podcast, we've talked about Joe Dante a lot, of just a very unique, quirky, and fun director, of having a lot of almost like a twisted child view on a lot of things for some of these, like this, The Burbs, one, my personal favorite, like Matinee. Granted, he also did The Howling, but this is more in line with his other ones of like The Burbs, and more in lines with Matinee, of it's not necessarily not a kid's movie, but it's definitely a lot of jokes, a lot of humor, a lot of just general sensibilities that are a little off kilter that would just make a kid not necessarily understand entirely everything that's going on, which I think is just indicative of the 80s of let's give kids some stuff that they're going to end up having to have a conversation with their parents about, as opposed to let's make sure that there is nothing in this movie at all that can be deemed as like an issue for a kid, which is why we grew up so well adjusted. So I don't know if you guys knew that Chris Columbus wrote this.
No, not until I watched the opening credits.
I was more enthused that Jonathan Banks is in this movie.
Wait, what? Is he?
Yeah, for those Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul.
Was he one of the cops?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, he's doesn't he thinks it's a prank.
He's the one that's like, I want to go home now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, I didn't even realize that.
That was the biggest thing that stood out to me anyway.
It's interesting seeing Chris Columbus early on in his career writing this, which I think shortly after this, he directed like Adventures in Babysitting. He directed Home Alone, Home Alone 2, Mrs. Doubtfire, like a number of things, the Harry Potter movies. He wrote a lot of those as well. But I think Chris Columbus has a very good sensibility about him as far as writing a specific, like a Christmas time, or writing like a very specific, almost saccharine feel to it that works well with Joe Dante, adding a little bit of the twistedness to Gremlins. But I don't know how much of you guys know Chris Columbus.
I've seen a lot of his stuff.
Yeah, everything you've named. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Tim, we watch movies. You're making it sound like, have you heard of this guy? He's done a couple movies like Jaws, Jurassic Park. It's pretty popular, but just in case if you haven't heard of him.
Just trying to produce discussion.
I got you.
So I'm not going to waste anybody's time. Everybody knows the cast in this. Zach Galligan, he also played in Waxwork. Hoyt Axton is the father, Rand Pelser. Phoebe Cates is Kate, the love interest and friend throughout town.
Is her name Katie Phoebes?
Phoebe Cates?
In the movie, it's Katie Phoebes.
Is it Katie Phoebes?
No.
Oh, okay. I was just saying, like,
just
oh my
a funny
God.
coincidence, like Phoebe Cates, and her name's Kate in the movie, but Katie Phoebes.
And we have Dick Miller, a Joe Dante staple, as Mr. Futterman, the rather xenophobic, buy American local plow driver.
Crap foreign car hater.
I love how he's like, oh, these foreign things, I hate them. It's like, then why do you keep buying them? Buy American then if you hate the TV so much.
Wait, does America make televisions?
There's your problem.
He wants a working one. So yeah, like it's always great seeing Dick Miller in any of the Joe Dante things, but especially
He's a favorite.
I liked him better in the second one because in the second one he's a little bit more goofy and likable as opposed to this one. Like it's still fun as a character, but also it's like
all he's missing is a MAGA hat.
Yeah, like I wouldn't hang out with him or like, hey, let's have a beer, Mr. Futterman. No, you seem like you would probably be a little ranty after a few. So how about we get into this thing?
Wait, no box office?
Sure. So 1984, June 8th, it opened in the same month as some other well-known films, The Karate Kid.
Opened in June?
Yeah.
Why? Because it's a Christmas movie?
Yeah.
Studios don't understand how time works.
That's so weird.
It's so baffling to me over the years of all of these various things of like, oh, this like movie about it takes place on Halloween. When's it released? August. Or this Christmas movie. When was it released? Well, it didn't. Hocus Pocus was released actually Hocus Pocus I think was released in like August or something like that, or like July.
Yeah, I forget when. Well, it's not the right month for it whatsoever.
Yeah, it's like all these things of, like its audience didn't react well to it. Yeah, because they were probably at the pool. They were too busy to watch a Christmas film in June.
And then nowadays, it's like, unless it is Christmas, they won't dare even release it out of schedule. I really wanted to see Krampus when it came out because, for box office, it came out against The Force Awakens, so it was in theaters for like all of 3 days. And because it's only a Christmas movie, I had to wait an entire year for it to come back out on video, whereas everything else is coming out within 2 months of theatrical release. Nope, it's a holiday movie. It has to come out for Christmas.
Scrooge at least came out, I think on Thanksgiving, so that's something.
Wait, which one?
That's appropriate.
Oh, yeah, at least it's closer.
Yeah.
Christmas starts in like November 13th anyway, so.
Yeah, 13th,
Yeah. So it opened against other little-known films in June of 1984 as The Karate Kid, Bachelor Party, and my favorite of those three, if you've ever seen Streets of Fire.
No.
Diane Lane, Rick Moranis, Willem Dafoe, and Michael Pare.
It beats those other movies? I mean, it sounds like a good cast.
I like Streets of Fire more than Karate Kid and Bachelor Party. Gremlins is still my favorite out of all of those in June of 1984, but Streets of Fire is second. It's like this weird, almost urban, mythical kind of feel of, here's like a fantasy fairy tale version of, I think it was like New York or Chicago. I think it's Chicago. And this like guy rolls back into his own old town, and there's a famous singer who's in town with her manager, Rick Moranis, and she's doing like a rock show. And then Willem Dafoe is leading this like band of bikers that show up and kidnap her. So he decides to get his pals together and go back out after her. Also, Bill Paxton's in that movie. But it's a fun one. There's a lot of fun like kind of musical numbers that she does as part of her rock band. So Streets of Fire, check it out.
Nope.
So did anybody have any other June releases or box office results?
Which one released closest to my birthday? That's the best movie of June.
Start by telling me your birthday.
I'll dox myself. Suppose you want to know what street I grew up on and what elementary school I went to.
Dean, where did your parents get married?
It's your mother's maiden name.
You're married now, right? Where did you go on your honeymoon?
All of those like Facebook chain letter games of like, oh, you can figure out your stripper name. It's just the name of your first pet and your mother's maiden name, the street you grew up on, the first make and model of your car. What's yours?
Clever.
And as a kid, I always thought like, oh, that's kind of dumb. That's like And then I realized it's not only dumb, like, no, it's like social engineering or social hacking. So
Thieves are lazy.
hey, work smart, not hard.
Yeah.
So I think all of them release closest to your birthday, Dean. Watch Streets of Fire, and that'll be your birthday gift to you.
Okay.
So this movie opens up in Chinatown with a narration from Billy's father, played by Hoyt Axton, of explaining how he's looking for Christmas gifts while trying to, his words, move merchandise in Chinatown, which doesn't sound like he's an inventor trying to sell his products. It sounds very different of an 80s film where he's, around Christmas time, just trying to move merch in Chinatown.
He's trying to bring snow to Chinatown.
Yeah. Just trying to make sure it's a white Christmas this year.
It's snowing in Chinatown, baby.
That's what he says at the end of the movie when they slam him against the car and handcuff him. They just kick into Jingle Bell Rock as it's snowing. So I have to say, all of his inventions in this movie, it has to be a nightmare to live with this guy.
Fuck that. No way. I couldn't. I'm in agreement. That was way too much. One of my notes later on, I mentioned, I like how everyone just tolerates the inventions despite how none of them actually working.
I feel like he would get along with Rick Moranis from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Yeah. Except I feel like I would hang out with him more because he seems like an inventor who also, if you didn't know he was an inventor, is just kind of a normal run-of-the-mill 80s dad of just hawking goods. But I kind of like the bathroom buddy.
I think he gets off on squirting that toothpaste at people. It happens a lot.
I liked his progression of inventing because at first it was toothpaste, and then later on he noticed, if it's going to squirt out like that won't work on a toothbrush. But what if I change out the toothpaste to shaving cream, and that works out a lot better? So I like to see him actually evolving what he was doing in real time. I thought that was pretty clever.
And then finally it's mace. Billy uses it to fend off the gremlins. So yeah, the bathroom buddy, it is kind of cool, as you said, seeing the progression over the movie. I think ultimately, yeah, he probably would come up with some cool ideas. I mean, they have a pretty nice house. They live in a nice town. He's got to sell some stuff. He's a good salesman, even if all of his stuff is having a lot of kinks worked out there. So Rand Peltzer ends up, while he's trying to move snow in Chinatown, ends up going into this kind of in curios antiquities shop where he's introduced to an old man and his grandson. And he's trying
the grandson it's the grandson's yeah, come to my grandpa's shop. I don't know where they just happened to meet, and he's maybe he tried
bags him.
He tried to sell the kid something. I don't know.
Come to my grandfather's shop. Okay, where is it? He just puts the bag and zip tie over him.
Well, it's almost like going into Canal Street. It's hey, I got belts to sell. Oh, we have belts too. We should check it out.
But so he pitches him the bathroom buddy in this case, which I found it interesting that he says, so you're out and about, but you haven't brushed your teeth. You have a bad case of dragon breath. And when he says it, there's just gong sound effect.
You forgot to brush your teeth. You got yourself a bad case of dragon breath. Bad breath.
He says dragon breath. Well, he looks down and there's a dragon statue right in front of him. And he's actually just bad breath. I don't know. It's a weird... Oh, are you insulting him because he's got dragons? I don't know.
Is that racist? Am I being racist? I'm
sorry. That's what it feels like.
Take my bathroom buddy. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mr. Peltzer. And he puts the bag back over his head. So the Mogwai sound is iconic.
The singing.
What is that?
Mogwai.
What's he doing?
Singing. He does that sometimes.
I like how Discord immediately cut you out thinking that it was just noise.
Oh yeah.
So I just hear and then just dead silence.
You'll hear it on the actual recording.
interesting to think that Howie Mandel did the voice of Gizmo.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I try not to think about it because I think of Gizmo as just like, it's like trying to think of the Muppets and being like, oh yeah, like that's a person controlling
That's
that
Jim
Muppet.
Henson.
That's a guy doing
That's
that
Jim
voice. It's like,
Henson.
it kind of ruins it for me. So I try not to remember that Howie Mandel is doing the voice of Gizmo. Like Gizmo is now doing Deal or No Deal somewhere.
I just think Bobby's World.
Yeah.
Usually when I watch it, I don't like I can separate the two, but this last time watching it, that's all I could hear. It was weirder for me to think that Gizmo, it was also what's his name from Little Monsters, Maurice.
Oh, yeah.
That was a harder bridge to cross, realizing like this is the same guy versus just Howie Mandel.
Which I would think that he would have had a bigger like explosion onto the scene doing like his stand-up and whatnot, and then getting Gremlins, because it's like Gremlins was a big movie doing voice work for it, and then actually playing in Little Monsters as one of the leads. That expect to see him popping up like a Robin Williams or something in a bunch of different kids comedies and things like that for years to come. But I think he just kind of removed himself from a lot of those, or if he didn't, I just have no idea what stuff he was in during that time other than Bobby's World.
No idea. That was the last thing I remember seeing him in. And then just all of a sudden, it's like he's on Deal or No Deal. And then now it's like America's Got Talent or one of those shows. He's not on American Idol, right?
Not currently,
No, it's
no.
America's Got. I think it's America's Got Talent.
America's Got Idols.
Probably.
He was on St. Elsewhere for 137. Oh my God, 137 episodes. So that's what he was doing between 1982 to 1988. He was also Animal on
nothing.
Muppet Babies.
Animal?
Yeah, he was Animal on Muppet Babies.
I can never watch Muppet Babies again.
So yeah, I guess he was consistently doing a bunch of different voices and popping up in various things between there. I think it was just not anything specifically that would stick in my head as, oh yeah, absolutely. Like that's the other Howie Mandel movie. Also, we probably should just get it out of the way. Frank Welker also did voices in this movie. So take a drink.
I'm not surprised.
I'm not surprised. I didn't even fact check that.
He wasn't even hired. He just he
just showed up.
He just trolls around this recording studios, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm in this session." He goes up to random mics and just starts making noises. And they're like, "Oh shit, that's pretty good."
Yeah,
It'd be funnier if it wasn't
I'm not.
actually him recording voices for the Gremlins, and it was just like he was there for the baby on the street when the woman was trying to plead to Mrs. Deagle. Baby wasn't loud enough in the carriage, so it's like, Frank, can you step? I got it. Don't worry.
Well, that's when they bring in that one guy from what was the dinosaur movie we did?
Frank Welker. Oh, you mean like the villain guy?
The Whitey the janitor.
Yeah.
That we checked out the other things he did, and it was
He's
just
the
like
baby
Theo
guy.
Baby
That's
or whatever.
right. Oh, I got my voice
Just got
actors
the
mixed
baby
up.
market locked down.
The baby king of Hollywood. I don't want that nickname anymore.
Put that on the back of a members only jacket. So I like how he hears the sound from the Mogwai and he decides he wants to buy it, and he's told no. And like, how very American white guy of him, of just being like, okay, no, yeah, I get it. But what about $200?
I fact checked this. $200 in 1984 is the equivalent in purchasing power to about $573.65 today.
So that means he still couldn't buy a PS5 on release.
Damn, I didn't think the inflation jumped that much since then.
Well, the nice thing is that all of our cost of living has been adjusted for our salaries to equal that inflation.
That's
Thank you,
why I
Ronald
don't
Reagan.
complain.
Your legacy is intact.
I like how
It'll
like
trickle down any day now.
I like how he's the salesman and then he just gets fleeced by the old, it's not for sale. I mean, I know the grandpa literally doesn't want to sell it, but it's like, oh, that works on him. I have to have it.
I want it more.
Dog for sale. Dog for sale. How much for the dog? He's not for sale. That's a Simpsons joke slotted in there.
So the grandson decides that he's going to have a back alley deal with Rand anyway, and sell
Literally.
off the Mogwai. Literally, actually. The eponymous back alley deal. So it's like this odd slow-mo after they do the deal, and the grandson sneaks him the Mogwai, and then they have to like shoehorn in all the rules. So as he's walking away, they're just, okay, do this as a slow-mo, and then just try to cram in the kid just explaining all of the rules to him, and then having a dialogue before this scene ends. Because it just felt kind of tacked on at that point, unless they just realize like, oh, we never explained the rules.
It doesn't say the consequences either.
Nope.
I have big problems with the after midnight rule, but I know it's a movie.
Oh, I have problems with all the rules. Like, what's too much light? So the 3 rules to establish: you can't get them wet, you can't expose them to bright lights, and you can't feed them after midnight. So of course, the midnight one, it's like, well, what's midnight?
Right.
If it's like 1 a.m. in New York, it's not 1 a.m. in Chicago, you know?
When does after midnight end? Is it midnight to 5 a.m.? When does breakfast start?
Probably like sunrise.
I feel like to figure out these rules, there are probably a lot of dead Mogwai in the back of that alley. Like, I feel like there was a lot of trial and error going on to be like, sunlight kills them.
You know, they're still making a show, right?
Oh yeah, aren't they doing like the animated one for Disney Plus
I don't think it's Disney. I think it's
or like Paramount Plus or something?
Yeah, one of those.
Imagine the first time he's like, all right, this Mogwai experiment's over. Take him out back and drown him. Holy shit.
So you remember what you told me to do with the puppies last week? Well, I did that with the Mogwais, and you wouldn't believe what just happened. I think that's what Christopher Lee was doing in the second one.
What, drowning them?
Just like all the different experimentations and stuff.
Oh no, yeah, that makes sense. I need to rewatch that one because that's just, I forgot Christopher Lee is in it, and then I remember all the scenes with him of like the vampire one and all of that. It's a hoot. So after Rand ends up getting the Mogwai, we end up kind of kicking into the top of the town, which this is my absolute favorite little town center in any of the like the backlot sets and things like that. And my favorite Christmas song blares in as we see everything at Christmas time with Rockin' Ricky Rialto on the radio, which he's a interesting character that we see pop up, or rather we don't see, but he just pops up throughout this.
He reminded me of like Laszlo from Grand Theft Auto, because he's not a prominent character that you interact with usually in most of the games, but he's always there and he's always one of the radio DJs.
When you see that shot of the town center, I just expect it to be like Hill Valley.
Yeah, that's all I saw. Like, oh, that's where Marty runs into the movie theater. That's where Red is sleeping. That's where Doc was getting the DeLorean set up for the big experiment that night.
As I said, like the Gremlins town center of Kingston Falls is exactly what I think of as far as Christmas towns. Of like, I'm always searching every season to try to find a town in real life that looks like this. All of these very Christmassy seasonal towns, but unfortunately, it broke my heart to find out that this is a backlot and not like an actual location that I can just go to.
You can go to it.
True. On the Universal Studios tour. No, so yeah, even in town we have, it's kind of fun, all the introducing of the characters that we have as it pops around to like Ricky Rialto, and then we have the scene with the cops, and then we have the scene with a very young Corey Feldman dressed as a tree.
I forget he's in this.
Yeah, you don't know it's him until he takes it off later, right?
Well, I think it's one of those things if you hear his voice and it's like, oh yeah, that's Corey
That's
Feldman.
Mouth.
Yeah, in 3 years, he's going to be Donatello.
It's so weird to think it's that close together.
I mean, it's probably like 7 years, but he still looks pretty damn young in this movie to then be doing Donatello in 7 years.
So we have a young Corey Feldman as a human tree helping with all the Christmas tree shenanigans. And we get introduced to Billy, our main character played by Zach Galligan, who is trying to get his car to start so he can get to work. But when it doesn't start, he has to walk to work with his dog. Why does Billy bring his dog to work?
I mean, if everybody loves the dog, I would definitely take the dog to work.
And he is well trained.
But I feel like it's... Then again, he even had a spot underneath where he had, like, where he can link the dog up under his desk. So maybe they allowed it at the bank. I feel like there's a woman who's actively going around town looking to steal and murder my dog. Although maybe then it's a case of, I want to make sure my dog is in my sight and not, like, home so she can break in kind of deal.
Right.
Although then she would have to get through his mother, and his mother is tough.
She would stab her for sure.
Yeah.
She's MVP. She's up there in the pantheon with like fucking Ellen Ripley and...
I mean, honestly, she had the
Campbell.
biggest body count other than them having to use an explosion. But in terms of just sheer melee attacks,
She would stone cold stun that woman.
she puts her head in the microwave. And then we meet Dick Miller as Mr. Futterman, which, as I said, like, everything's better with Dick Miller. And I like how Mr. Futterman is so supportive of Billy and his art, of talking about, like, oh, like, you got to get out there. You shouldn't be, like, doing the bank your whole life. Like, you have that gift, yada, yada. And it's, despite all of the other problems with Mr. Futterman in this movie, of him being so, like, tragically anti-foreign anything, it's nice to see somebody being very supportive of Billy achieving his dreams, seeing as later on with Judge Reinhold, it's kind of the exact opposite.
Putz.
Yep.
That's my Judge Reinhold. It's always got to be so slimy. Except for, I guess, what Beverly Hills Cop. But
When he's got his head up his boss's butt about like the whole thing that goes down with Mrs. Deagle and the dog, and he's like siding with his boss, and the boss is like, giving him an attaboy and like, good boy. I have expected Judge to get like a treat as well, like a pat on the head.
Rubs him behind his ear. He just, like, stomps the ground a little bit.
have a
I've never
cookie.
seen someone be such a good lapdog than that. That was one of the best performances I'd ever seen.
Hey, 1980s action comedy lapdogs. They don't make them like they used to.
Name of my next dog, Judge.
Oh, like Dread? No, Reinhold.
So yeah, like we said, why bring his dog? Everybody loves a dog. Sure, bring him along. Mrs. Deagle is the actual devil, though. She is the Scrooge of this story with no redemption at the end.
It's the Mr. Potter.
I don't even have a dog, but if anybody demanded my dog so they can describe to me about torturing and murdering them, I would just kill that person. It's the only sensible choice. The town should have rallied as a group, as a mob in that bank, and just beat her to death with that snowman head.
If nobody talks, we're all safe.
Because, I mean, it's just ridiculous that she's, like, going on and on about, like, what she's going to do to the dog, and then the rest of the town folk next to her are just like,
That'd do it all right.
Yeah, guy's like, that'll do it, all right.
that'll do it all right.
Put him
Like,
in the dryer.
Thanks for the support.
High.
Okay,
It's like,
Billy, now can you
Jesus.
deposit my check? No.
She might be a serial killer.
That's always worked for me. I mean, welp. So she's the worst. We have Billy's dog taking off. Barney runs away because of it. She ends up panicking and saying, like, oh, my heart, all of that. This grinds my gears in this movie, and it only is redeeming to me because I know what happens to her later. But I'm surprised at how kind of vile they make her in terms of, like, a kid's movie. It's like if in Wizard of Oz, when instead of, like, I'll get you and your little dog too, she'd go on to describe what she will do to Toto once she obtains Toto. But I think that's
I'll
part of
remove his
the
teeth
Joe
one at a
Dante-ness.
time.
Yeah. And then just one of the flying monkeys. That'll do it. So I think it's just part of the Joe Dante twistedness of, like, yeah, it's a kid's thing, but also there's going to be stuff in here that kind of pushes that envelope a little bit more.
Joe Dante read a Stephen King book. He's like, yeah, this is how bullies need to be.
No, that would have been outside when that woman is like talking to Mrs. Deagle and she's like, we just need another week to make the payment. And then the kids both take out switchblades.
Carve her name.
Shut it, Deagle.
We don't have any ink to write these checks. Can we use your blood? Thanks.
We'll write you a check right now. Yeah, Billy, write him a check.
I think we have different ideas about what writing a check is.
Oh, looks like your body's writing checks, or you're writing checks your body can't cash.
And then Billy walks
Or
out. He's
can
like,
it?
no, she's serious. I can't cash those. What if we make them out to cash? No, that's not the problem here. So after this whole debacle, we end up going to the tavern where Kate works, Phoebe Cates' character. We have a fun little bar cameo. The gentleman, I don't know if you guys knew, that is next to Billy talking about his art and like, oh, like that's good, yada, yada. That's Chuck Jones, a famous creator involved with like Looney Tunes and all of that. You might hear his name tossed out there in terms of like Chuck Jones, Tex Avery, like all of those various names. But Chuck Jones was around that whole Looney Tunes era. So
Great.
cool. So I like how Judge Reinhold, despite the fact that Billy isn't a friend of his, evidently, still sits down there to talk about like, wow, like you really screwed up at work, didn't you? And then Kate comes by and then he's like, hey, you want to see my place? I got cable TV. What was
They can swear.
Yeah. It's like TV, but I pay for it.
You ever heard the F-bomb on television?
You're about to hear it now. It's a Joe Dante film. Kids should hear this. It's...
Say this to your parents, kids.
He doesn't. He's not even saying it as like a line. He looks dead in the camera, both hands. He grabs the lens, pulls the boom mic down to his lips.
Here I go. I'm gonna say it right now.
So yeah.
Oh,
so
boy.
I guess cable TV was a real big drawback then. They can go hang out and watch whatever was big on cable in 1982.
I get it.
Hill Street Blues. I don't know. Sanford and Son. Was that still on?
Dallas.
Dallas.
No, I don't know.
Shot
I don't know
JR.
anything about the networks back then.
Clearly, St. Elsewhere was on, seeing as Howie Mandel was on it for 137 episodes.
What threw me was the fact that he said he's 23. And like
Judge
he
Reinhold said he's
perpetually-
23?
Yeah, and he
Oh,
perpetually
boy.
looks like he's 34 to me at minimum.
Yeah.
Well, also, there's got to be... I know originally the script for Gremlins was a much darker script that they decided to kind of retrofit around a bit of a lighter skeleton. But I feel like there's still certain things in the script that, even aside from the dark stuff, that they just didn't change. Because I feel like the original Billy must have been a younger character or a younger person they were expecting, maybe closer to like, say, just out of high school or something like that, and he's still in town working. Because it seemed odd to me that Billy doesn't seem like he's fresh out of high school. He seems like he's like 30, but he's still like going
Yeah.
to his high school science teacher, and like he hangs out with Corey Feldman, who is probably 11, and they just like pal around and read comic books, which
I did think
hey,
it was
cool.
weird. He just takes his shirt off and like changes his shirt. And I'm like, this is strange.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's, hey, that's
With
great
him
that
in the
everybody
room.
has all of these various hobbies of like, yeah, it's a small town and we both like comics, or we both like, you like watching all of the cartoons I draw. But it just seemed like such a weird age difference
Yeah.
throughout this of like, Billy, why aren't you hanging out with people? Like, you're macking on Phoebe Cates and then going back to talk about it with like a kid who is not even in puberty yet.
Did you smell her cooties, Billy?
What are those? I'll tell you all about them.
Have you seen a boob before?
I believe they're called yabos.
Did you smell her yabos? Ooh, what the fuck are you talking about?
It's a new slang from Boston.
I don't know. I spent a lot of time in this tree. I'm getting a little warm.
Oh, earlier when I just in my mind, it was funny. Like the cop comes to try to get a free tree, and then the guy with the white beard comes in. He's like, oh. Because the kid is dressed in a tree suit. He's like, I'm here for my tree. I just half expected him. He's like, hey, go with him. Like, you're the tree. Get on top of that car.
Buy me.
That's all.
What was that? So I forgot where we were at this. The tavern. So yeah. So Jared tries to entice Kate with the power of cable TV. And then we get to see Billy's house for the first time, which, as I said, what hellscape it must be living in this house of the inventor when it's everything has to be an invention, like some Rube Goldberg-esque device you can't just answer the phone. It has to be a remote control that activates some other thing. You can't just juice an orange. It has to be some sort of mega juicer contraption that like somehow is able to triple the amount of juice in an orange. Because when they dropped one of those in there and it exploded around the entire room, that could not have possibly have been one orange.
No. Either that or it never spit out the juice from the last 6 oranges, and it finally did.
It's just like it finally got that release. It finishes just like,
Billy just breaks down like Jesse Pinkman. He can't keep getting away with it.
I like on my next notice, after we just had that other discussion at the tavern, Billy is the dumbest 35-year-old child I've met. I mean, especially for the fact that Rand gets home, gives Billy the package, which has Gizmo, and then he takes it, and then he like shakes it against his head after hearing there's something alive in there, and he's like, oh, what is it, like a bird cage? Yeah. If it's a bird cage, why are you shaking it? Like
in a box,
is there a live
in a
creature
square
in there?
box.
And he's like kicking it around on the floor. I just wanted to make more noise so I can tell what it is before I open it. So I don't know about you guys. Gizmo's the greatest little dude in the history of cinema.
For multiple reasons.
Name them.
Reason 1. The animatronics are really good on it. He looks cool. He feels real.
On a personal note, I didn't know you liked Gremlins that much. It seemed like out of nowhere, just all of a sudden, it's like you had like 15 Mogwai in your bedroom. Like almost like you had one and then you spilt water on it.
So here's the thing. I'm a sentimental sort. I bought a Gizmo at Target one year because I was like, oh, I love Gremlins. Like I love Gizmo Gang forever. So I brought him home. And then like the following Christmas time or whatever it was, I went and I saw like, oh, there's still a lot of those Gizmo. And then I came back later and it was like, oh, still like 4 more Gizmo there. And then I came back and it was like listed as like last on clearance kind of deal. And my brain went, oh no, they're going to throw out the Gizmo. So I bought all the Gizmo that they had at Target and brought them back home. And I don't know what part of my child brain was just like, oh, you can't let that happen. You have adult money now. So now I have like 5 Gizmo that sit up on my bookshelf.
You just go around to different Targets buying Gizmo.
Yeah. So I don't know why.
That explains how they multiplied so quickly.
It's because it just, when I see the clearance thing, and I'm like, oh man, what are they going to do? Throw them out? And then I was picturing like, man, I don't want to see like 4 little Gizmo dolls just like stuffed into a trash compactor.
Kids don't know what they're missing, God damn it.
This is going to be a bit later on. This is an investment.
Kids would like this movie, I feel. Still today.
Oh, yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, right now, for anybody listening, unless they took it off, it was on HBO Max recently.
It's still there.
I think it's definitely worth buying. I think it's definitely a classic. But if you're on the fence, just stream it. It's worth watching once. Worse ways to spend 90 minutes of your time.
It is a good movie. It's well written. It's well acted. It flows really well.
Yeah. And I think it gets a little goofy in parts, and it gets a little like kind of hokey in parts as far as like some of the Gremlins saying words and things like that. But it still never goes into like buffoonery. The Gremlins are still dangerous.
Mm-hmm. It takes itself serious enough that it's not too much, but it's still tongue-in-cheek enough that they know, like, this is stupid if we went that serious with it.
Yeah.
So they balance themselves well.
Yeah, like they make it just enough of a joke that it doesn't seem like it's this overly dramatic situation, but then they still make them dangerous enough that there's still some stakes out here that I think really work. Which, as you said, like the second movie gets just goofier, but it still works in a different fun way. So
I love that
Rand presents.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, you first.
I didn't know what you were going to... I was going to talk about the rules.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, that's what I was going to talk about.
I just say it's funny that he... it's almost like the same thing that happens at the beginning of the movie. It's like the rules are an afterthought. He just reads the rules, and we don't get Billy being like, why? Why can't I do these things? It's just like, well, okay.
He gives it to him, and then he's like, oh, like, what was it? Like, oh, let's take a picture or something. He takes it, and then Gizmo freaks out. Yeah. And then all of a sudden he's like, oh, no. And then he's like, oh, that reminds me. I should probably tell you. Bright lights will just end its soul. Don't feed it after midnight or we all die. Don't get it wet or you'll be damned to hell, Billy. I probably should have led with all those.
You know how uncontacted tribes probably think their spirits are trapped in cameras? That actually happens with a Mogwai.
I'm sorry, but Gizmo is now just a husk. What made Gizmo Gizmo is gone, Billy.
You remember One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest at the end? Billy just suffocates him with a pillow.
No, the chief does.
Yeah.
His window's open, all of a sudden he wakes up and he's
Juicy
like, where's Giz?
When did we get a drinking fountain in the house?
It's the first time he broke in. So a lot of rules presented after the fact for a kid who just shook the crate thinking there was a pet in it. He probably should have led with those. Like, I think Rand really should understand or recognize what he's dealing with here with Billy.
Probably why he still lives at home.
Just blinded by that parental love.
I probably shouldn't have tested all my inventions on you as a kid, Billy.
What if actually he is the adult and he's the one making the money for the household because Rand isn't able to sell all of his inventions because none of them work?
Yeah, maybe.
You are 100% correct. That makes sense on why he's home. It's Rand doesn't make money. Oh, wow. That's sad.
This is a revelation.
Yeah.
That is sad.
And he just blew $200 on this thing.
Yeah. Which he took out of the joint account he has with Billy. But Dad, that was the mortgage. So, yeah, like I said, we have the house after he gets Gizmo. Billy is trying to make orange juice. There's no way there is that much juice in that orange that he uses. We end up having Corey Feldman's character come over to visit. And this is when I was thinking about, like, there's got to be a different script where they had a closer in age situation, or there has to be like something else of like, did he know Corey Feldman, like an older sibling who moved away or something like that? Just because it's like them palling around seems like a weird mismatch, but it's still fun.
That scene weirded me out a lot because in this scene, that's when he multiplies for the first time. So up until that point, you know, he's being shown the Mogwai, and of course the kid wants one, and Billy's like, no, you can't. And the kid is all over it. He's loving the Mogwai every second of it. The second he's being told no, like, it pretty much instantly turns him off. And then once Gizmo multiplies, he really has no interest anymore. And I thought really was weird on how, like, pretty much after this point in time, too, he just disappears from the movie. He shows up, like, one more time afterward, and that's it, if that.
Yeah, because I think he may go with him to the school or whatever to show the science teacher. And then we just, I think, see him later on fighting off gremlins from his house with, like, a slingshot. But that's kind of the extent of his involvement at that point. Which I think after he multiplied, he did end up asking him, like,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 new ones. Now can I have one?
Dude, Gizmo It sounds like he's dying when he gets the water spilled on him. It's like
He hits
the worst
He hits a
burning
pitch
was-
that Pete's eyes just blow out of his skull.
just like be freaked out, like, oh my god, this thing is dying.
I'm picturing like Arnold in Total Recall when he ends up out on Mars.
This thing is suffering to death right now.
Hey, could be the next Peltzer pet. So like poor Giz, just for the fact that like this is what within the first 24 hours and they've already had 3 screw ups of like bright light hurting him, getting him wet, that literally breaks all of the rules. Later that night he like feeds him, so immediate problems. So as we said, like Rand sees it, this could be the next Peltzer pet. He looks at it as a revenue stream he can monetize. Which I like how he decides,
Your mom won't kick me out of the house if this one goes through.
we can finally buy back your brother and sister.
Because what I didn't get was, if they multiply that easily, why haven't you seen these before?
I mean, it
That's
could
a
be
huge
just
red flag.
the grandfather just hasn't screwed up. Or if he did, he immediately handled it.
No, I mean from Rand's perspective. Like, if they multiply that easily and he's going to try to monetize off of it, it's like, why do you think that you haven't seen any of them before? If they multiply that easy, there's a reason why you haven't seen one of them before.
Which I like how he also says, oh, like we can make a killing off this. Like it could be the next pet. And then immediately in that same scene, it's just like, well, okay. And he just goes back to working on another invention and just like leaves the house. We
We'll
could be
shelve this
millionaires.
$1 million
later.
idea.
Yeah.
These cards won't shuffle themselves. Deal
This is
themselves.
fascinating. But anyway, the bathroom buddy. So all of the other Mogwai, they're not created. I've been referring to them as the noisy boys. So all of these other Mogwai string up Barney and Chris's lights during the night, and they end up finding the dog hanging outside, alive.
Poor Barney.
Which, as a kid, I didn't remember that the dog is brought back in, because the dog's brought in, they like warm him up, and then the father takes him to drop him off at like the grandparents or something until he comes back for Christmas. And for some reason in my head, I just remember the dog being strung up and then the dog not being in most of the movie.
They left him up.
When I rewatched it years later of like, oh yeah, like Gremlins, I just remember, yeah, it's really good. I mean, other than that one Phoebe Cates story and then the part where they murder that dog, that it was like a pleasant surprise of like, oh my God, I've been wrong this entire time.
The dog lives.
It's the best kind of wrong.
I'm sorry for all my
I think
entries
there's a website
on thedogdie.com.
Oh, yeah, never mind.
That's the one.
That's it.
Which I guess they expanded to not only just be that, but just all of general things that people would want to check of like, oh, there's a child in the movie. Does the child die? Does the pet die? Does like this happen? Like all of these various things that might be a problem for certain people. So useful site. Also Kids in Mind for anybody that likes to proofread things or proof watch things before showing it to other people. Kids in Mind, I don't know if it's still around, but it was a cool site that they broke down movies of like what's all the profanity in the movie, what are all the violent scenes and what happens, what is all of the sexual situations. So this way you can just check it quick and be like, okay, cool, like that sounds kind of tame, that's fine, we can watch this. I use it to proofread things before I watch it with my parents because I don't want to sit through anything awkward, and it's benefited me for a decade.
Spoilers.
I regret not doing that with my mother watching. I wanted to show her Breaking Bad. I forgot in the first episode he gets a hand job from his wife, and it shows on how unhappy he is with his marriage. That was really awkward, and she's like, I don't want to watch this anymore. And I'm like, this is so disappointing because it is literally one of the best shows on this
I thought you were going to
planet.
say one of the best scenes.
No.
Come on, Mom.
Stick it out just for this. You don't understand art. Yeah, so we end up having the Barney gets strung up, which gets rescued. And then we end up at the school the next day because Billy ends up bringing in one of the Mogwai into, I think his name is Roy. the science teacher to show him of like, hey, this is something I found. This is what happens, yada, yada. And they kind of test it out. And he could have gone about a better way to do blood tests and things like that. It was a little probably traumatizing for this Mogwai, which is why
he seemed the only other nice one.
Yeah, like he didn't seem overly like aggressive.
He wasn't a brat.
Yeah. And then it's like, oh, and we're just going to prod you with this needle. And it's like, you could have done a better method of doing that. Like, maybe that's why you're not an actual scientist. Yeah.
Yeah.
So was he not at all surprised to see this animal? Like, what the fuck is this? Yes, I know it.
This could be the new Roy Pet.
Like, before you get to the multiplication with water, like, I feel like you look at this and like, I've never seen anything like this animal.
That rule still bothers me because the second they took Gizmo out of the box, the dog licked it. And it like saliva has, I'm sure, some trace of water. How much water is water before it considered water to multiply with?
Yeah, and that's one of my problem with the rules. Like, does every creature needs to drink water or to live, like, pretty much?
And then not only that, there's like 10 feet of snow outside. So the smallest little like speck of snow would be enough for it to technically multiply. So if the wind blew hard enough and some of the snow got kicked up, would that be enough to get it to multiply? I don't know.
If Gizmo stubbed his toe and cried, would the tears initiate him multiplying? And then because he's multiplying, he gets worried and cries more and multiplies more. And it becomes this feedback loop. A wide shot of Billy's house, and you see all the doors and windows blow clean out from Mogwai.
I do like in the sequel they poke fun at this concept because like they completely gloss over it in the entire first movie, and then in the second one it's just like, what if the thing eats like popcorn and it gets a kernel stuck in its tooth at 11 o'clock, but then at like 12:01 that's when the kernel pops out and he swallows it. Does that count?
That's good. It deserved to be poked at.
So it's a lot of things here. I wonder if when the dog, when Barney licked him, it may have been that it didn't make skin contact. It was just on the fur.
Oh no, it did.
So
you saw the ear move.
Oh. So yeah, I don't know why Gizmo's not just like self-replicating by mistake constantly.
He looks so sad when he replicated too. Like,
I mean,
it's
I
almost
wonder
like
if
he
this is
knew
not
the
the first time. Yeah, what if this is not the first time it's happened? And it's like, I have shed myself many a time over 1,000 millennia.
It has never ended positively.
Immediately it's just like, I must kill them all. And then Billy wakes up and Gizmo and Chief are there with two little pillows. So
I just imagine like Gizmo leads them to this like bunker shed with a bunch of weapons and stuff. He's like, you're gonna need these. I knew this would happen
Super
again.
Soakers? No. Go home, Pete. Well, I just like later in the movie when well, first of all, I like when all the gremlins are attacking the radio station, you hear Rock and Ricky Rialto of like,
Rock and Ricky's getting fed up with all this Orson Welles crap, so cool it, will ya? What's that? Kitty, what's that back there? Some of Rock and Ricky fan? Hey, you're not Rock and Ricky fan?
But then later I thought like, oh yeah, then Rock and Ricky gets it, and then later it's, oh, Rock and Ricky's still alive, and he's like, I'm still alive, and we're about to open the hoses on him. Rock and Ricky, no.
Fun fact: Rock and Ricky's played by Don Steele, who I recognize from Death Race 2000, the Roger Corman movie. He's like an announcer in that. That's all. So he's got that announcer voice.
Oh yeah, Rock and Ricky's fun. And
that's a great joke. We're about to open the hoses.
Well, I immediately love we got some Rock and Ricky fans out here, and the glass breaks. Oh, you're not Rock and Ricky fans.
How do you know? He's profiling.
You have the demographic I pitched to. You're small and furry. Yeah, so we end up going back to the tavern. We end up having them. They're closing the place down. Mr. Futterman's there. He's soused and heading out as they kind of guide him. And again, he discusses his xenophobia and paranoia of all of the gremlins and the machines of foreign vehicles and objects and things like that. Which I like how he gets into his plow to take off, and then they're like, you might want to walk. And I like how he doesn't fight them on it. He stops. He's like,
I don't think it's such a good idea that you drive. Why don't you walk home?
You know, Katie, I think maybe I'll walk home.
Good.
He's a good guy.
like, at least he's an agreeable drunk.
But how many times has he gotten in that plow? That makes me when they weren't around.
I feel bad for Mrs. Futterman. He's out in the bar getting drunk. We know where she is. She's just at home.
Yeah. Although, like, if all he talks about at home is, like, how much he hates foreign products, she's probably like, give it a rest. Go to the bar. Drive home.
Hey, you want a Sapporo? That foreign beer. Give me Budweiser.
I only drink good Budweiser with a good American name like Budweiser. So Billy walks Kate home. And it's at this point that Kate explains Christmas suicide rates, the increase in people feeling despondent around the holidays due to lack of family and where they're at in their lives and all of these things. And Billy understands nothing. He just kind of is like, oh gosh, I mean, like, but what if they just thought about how much family's great at Christmas time? And he just continues along. Because I think at one point she says, like, I don't celebrate Christmas. And he's like, what are you, a Buddhist or something? Which I feel like is like a Casey Jones line. We'll get into Kate a little bit later in terms of her Christmas stories on why she doesn't celebrate Christmas and the lack of joy and family around the holidays, which is the wildest out of left field thing in this film, despite the fact that there's little multiplying green people. Back at the lab, Doc runs the blood tests on his Mogwai, and we kind of keep hopping back and forth between the lab for the next couple minutes as far as these, because after that we jump back to the house where the noisy boys fool Billy into by breaking his clock, asking for food. Good thing Billy has just a plate of uncovered cooked chicken wings in his fridge that he then presents to them.
Fucking weird. I hate it.
You heard of like
None of
spores
it
that
made
could form
sense.
on your food there?
Well,
Uncovered.
then I like how these little fools just devour this. And like
This is one of the most horrifying shots in all of cinematic history, is watching that super close up of those those Mogwai eating the chicken wings.
yeah, just like turning it to mush of just like just smashing
The sound with it. People say like, oh, I don't like horror movies like Hostel and Saw. That grosses me out.
So greasy.
Gremlins, 84, Joe Dante. Scariest and not scary. Well, not scary, but like it skeeves me out way more than any like toe cutting needle pit being jumped into thing that I've ever seen in cinematic history. That one just like nails on chalkboard.
Now, what if Billy didn't fall for it and didn't bring them food, and they decide they have to eat one of the other Mogwai
To transform.
after midnight? And then it's this exact scene, but instead of chicken, it's just them all feasting on another Mogwai. And then they all transform based off of that.
Just find a skeleton the next morning.
Yeah.
It's just the same close-ups, like yum, 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 yum.
Billy wakes up and he looks, he's just like... It's like, what's his name? Joe Morrison in Terminator 2 with the...
Oh yeah.
Billy's just sitting there in bed. can't
1,000-yard
move.
stare.
Also, PSA: never feed your pets cooked chicken or like bone in chicken.
right?
No, you can feed it raw, but you can't do it with cooked.
Well, you can feed them raw chicken?
Dogs can
Oh,
eat raw
interesting.
meat. Yeah.
I've never had an
Yeah,
animal.
because the the bones when cooked, they become like they're more brittle and they can do damage when swallowed. Whereas raw, it's not brittle and they're able to digest it easily.
Oh, interesting.
Is Gizmo the only Mogwai that doesn't want to become a gremlin? Because it seems like the other ones, I don't know if they're just hungry and they tricked him into they know the rules and tricked him, or they're like, we need to turn in the Gremlins now. Like, why doesn't Gizmo want to change, and why do they want to change so quickly into Gremlins?
Maybe it's like a copy of a copy thing, and the farther they go down, the more wild they
like
get.
Multiplicity, like the Michael
like
Keaton
multiplicity. Maybe like the last of the Gremlins are just out there like sitting around spitting on bugs. But yeah, I mean that's a good point as far as like why is it that Gizmo doesn't have that killer instinct?
After it multiplying so many different occasions for him to know this is bad at this point when they're little babies still, like the little Mogwai nuggets. I'm surprised he just doesn't like run over and like try to smother them or something. Or
yeah, Gizmo just runs up while they're still little balls and he just like soccer kicks them into the fireplace.
Maybe Gizmo comes from a long line of pacifist Mogwai. Like he was, they breed dogs for specific jobs and purposes and sizes, and like maybe they killed any Mogwai that showed any kind of violence.
They just kept using an eyedropper on one Mogwai and then seeing if the next one was good.
Right. Yeah. Lots of incinerated Mogwai.
So I will be very interested in what they do with a Gremlin series.
It's going to be
just expanding
kids,
on Gizmo,
I think, because he's going to talk in this.
Oh, like not just like how he is in the movies, like straight up, conversation.
I think it's very much meant for children.
That's stupid. Media should be made for adults like us, who were once children. So yeah, so we have these little guys devour that chicken. And then the lab Mogwai steals the leftover sandwich that the doc leaves behind, which I can see that he's like, okay, time to wrap it up for tonight. But he like takes a bite of a sandwich, just lays it on the table and just like, well, bye. And then just walks out of the room and shuts the lights off. Like, what?
I'm not actually hungry.
I don't want to throw it away, but I also don't want to put it away in the fridge. I'll finish it later. So yeah, he ends up eating this, which like, who eats half a sandwich and then just walks away? But the Gremlins are born. After the eating, they turn into these kind of a pupal stage of these face hugger xenomorph eggs that then hatch into these gooey little gremlin people. So we kind of hop back and forth at this point to the invention convention where Rand is at, which is a lot of fun, like little Easter eggs there of, like in one scene, there's the people in the H.G. Wells time machine, and then it cuts back to the house. And then when it cuts back to the convention, there's just like smoke in the air, and there's just like, everybody's looking around. There's a bunch of fun little background things like that.
Wasn't the robot from Lost in Space?
I believe so, yeah. The Danger, Will Robinson.
Yeah.
School, the lab egg begins to hatch. The video continuing to play while he's like slowly searching the room does have kind of a very spooky vibe, which was kind of cool just because it's so much of the movie is kind of fun and lighter that when it does scenes like this, even though it ultimately ends in more of a jokey situation of, the gremlin kills him and sticks a needle in his butt because he ends up doing the blood test on him before. But it is kind of creepy of just like the video continuing to play and he shuts it off and then it turns itself back on as he's looking around the room for this thing. And the Gremlins do have a body count in this movie.
Yeah, lots of death.
I think the Gremlins probably killed more people in this movie than Chucky did in the first Child's Play.
Is that a fact?
I'd have to compare, but I'm pretty sure they do.
Science can solve this.
The doc gets a needle in his butt for his troubles, and the gremlin is still kind of running around from there. Which at this point, we hop back to the house where Gizmo's on the dartboard. And I like how as soon as the mother hears something upstairs that sounds like a commotion, she just like arms herself and grabs a knife and then goes upstairs to hunt it, like check it out. She is such an underrated character in this movie.
Yeah, she was. She should have been the one dealing with the gremlins at this point. Through the rest of the movie. She shouldn't have stayed.
Yeah. Like, actually, it would have been really cool if instead of, like, Billy, like, having a love interest and pairing up with her, it's, like, Billy and his mom or like his mom takes charge and just brings Billy along to hunt these down.
I just imagine her, it's like Inglourious Bastards. She kicks in the door of the movie theater with a machine gun and just starts blasting.
Instead of blowing it up, she sets it on fire.
She takes herself down with it.
She grabs a gremlin, bites its throat. So I like how the gremlins turn on, I think it's a Perry Como song, to draw the mother out. And these are definitely the scenes that show off that it is probably originally it was ended up being a little darker, but these are still fairly dark as far as her throwing one in like the mixer and throwing its parts all around the room.
The feet like spinning around like in the
and then she
blender.
just like finds another one and just like attacks it with a knife, and then she just Last House on the Left's one of them and just puts them in the microwave and explodes their head.
It's awesome.
So the mom wages war in this house, which then is fun that she ends up like finding the stocking that's making the noise, and then it's a trap from a gremlin that is the play toy or whatever it is, and then you see the actual gremlin in the tree that just drops down and attacks her, which luckily Billy rescues her in time by beheading the gremlin with a broadsword or
the one that keeps falling off
sword.
the wall.
Chekhov's sword.
Yeah.
Chekhov's sword.
I knew that. I forgot about that sword. I was like, oh yeah, they're planting that very heavily.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing is it's weird to plant it like that when it's not like a big payoff, because it's not like,
right.
oh, that's
it's not a crucial
It's like,
plot point.
It's Billy literally could have walked over there and just kicked it into the fire and it would have achieved the same results. So
yeah, you're right. It's not like the plot hinged on that sword killing that gremlin.
So as far as Billy beheading a gremlin, we have Stripe escape, the leader of that little crew from there, which then results in them kind of dropping the mother off at a friend's house because the mother is recovering and she's all scraped up and bit and whatnot. And then he goes chasing off after this thing over into the YMCA pool. So kind of the best place to be if you're a gremlin, I suppose.
The water carries over to the gremlin side. That's a really good evolutionary like trait.
Yeah, so Stripe decides to go big time and just dives into this pool. And it's a cool effect that they do of just like the roiling water and the smoke filling the room and the lights going off. And it's almost like, wasn't in AVP 2, wasn't there a scene at the pool of like...
Yes.
So, AVP 2, copying Gremlins.
Do the aliens multiply in the pool?
No, they fed them after midnight in that one.
What that sound that Stripe makes when he's in the pool? Ah. He's not in as much pain. He's just more like a cat that I think that's having sex.
And Pete gets there just in time, and he's like, "Billy, I'm here to..." And then he hears the noise again. He's like, "Ah!" Billy, he's trying to scan me. So Billy has to escape while Stripe just multiplies the dickens out of that place, which we then end up seeing the gremlins. It's like a montage of chaos of the gremlins raiding all of these various houses and causing all of these problems. And we go back to the Futtermans, and Mrs. Futterman seems really nice. It's a weird juxtaposition with Mr. Futterman of he's like pleasant but a little cantankerous with all of his thoughts. But that's when we end up having the television go out, so he decides to go upstairs to investigate, sees his plow turn on by itself, and then chases him back into the house, where he is shouting there are gremlins, and we assume that they are run over and killed.
We are all deeming them gremlins.
Thinking about it, the first time Gremlins I ever remember seeing them was the Looney Tunes cartoon.
Yeah, with the anvil and the plane and...
Yeah,
Wait, what?
I thought that was a nice little nod, because the first iteration of Gremlins was like the Chuck Jones Looney Tunes cartoon. I don't remember which one, but I'm pretty sure probably
Really?
Bugs was in it. Yeah. So
I
then
had
when
no
Tim
idea.
mentioned and how he made a little cameo, I felt like that was a little nod to that.
That absolutely was then, because I didn't even realize that.
Yeah.
So not only do we get to see the Futtermans in this case, but we have the mailbox terror of a man going to drop off letters, and the letters get spat back out. Then another guy decides to drop off a package and gets like his arm pulled into the mailbox as they get attacked. I mean, we have the gremlin traffic cop of like chewing out wires or messing with the wires and all of the lights going in town. And the police doubt Billy when he comes in. They think he's crazy until I like how Billy does the very typical thing of go in, tell the true story, and everybody thinks you're crazy. Except in this case, he just backs it up immediately.
They gotta.
Yeah, of just like, fine, if you don't believe me, here, look at this gizmo in my backpack. And it's like, you could have led with that. Although he probably wanted to preface it that it's like, I have one of the good ones, before he just walks in, pulls it out of his backpack, and they're like, whoa,
Shoot it!
shoot it!
I was just going to say, it might be just one of those things where we're like, it's like once you have a cell phone in movies, like, how do we write around this cell phone? It's ruining the plot. Like, well, why aren't the police just killing everything? Well, they think it's a joke, so yeah, that's why. That's why they're just sitting at the station.
So I like how they do believe him at that point, but then when they start getting the reports of all this other strange happenings, it's not they believe him to the extent of, oh, there are gremlins in town. They believe him that he has a creature they've never seen before in his backpack, but that's the extent. It's just, well, you stay here. We're going to go handle this. So you believe him that far, but not like, hey, there's other creatures about.
He's pissed in that cop scene.
Which one? Billy?
No, Gizmo. His eyes. He just looks like he wants to kill the cops.
Gizmo has priors.
Why'd you bring me here, Billy? I'm gonna run my identification.
They're gonna run my prints, Billy, and when they do, you're coming down with me. He has like a tiny little hand pillow he puts over Billy's face. It's like a marshmallow. So here's my favorite death in the movie, which all of you might see coming. Mrs. Deagle, Gremlin's out here handing out favors to this town. Because also I like how Deagle's names all of her cats after money, because you have, was it like drachma, kopeck, and dollar bill?
Yep.
So I just saw my own note and I forgot I wrote it. Never get tired of this old bird taking flight. So she ends up having like this automated thing, that chair that takes her up and down.
Chairlift, yeah.
She hears carolers and decides like, screw these kids. Like I hate carolers. I'm going to go take a bucket of cold water and splash it on these kids who are standing outside in winter. So when she opens it, she realizes the carolers are gremlins dressed up as carolers. And then while she's in there, a gremlin is tampering with her chair. So as she runs to the chair to try to get away, because it's not her time, she activates it and it accelerates where it finally launches her clean out the top floor window into the night.
She lives, I think.
No.
They're just like the next day the gremlins are dead. They're just a tracking shot. She's like impaled on a post somewhere outside her house.
No, she's still there, but she's like, I'm still alive. And Billy just caves her head in with a rock like Predator.
I'm just very badly burned. Yeah, that's an awesome shot of her launching out of the window. Sweet.
Just because it's so ludicrous of just like, oh, here she goes. And all of a sudden it's just like, and we pan outside, then it just blows clean out. So always love that. We are then presented to some other people who are definitely not Rock and Ricky fans. So Rand is trying to get home. And I think this is kind of a cool invention. I'm not a smoker, so I don't know. But he presents to him a smokeless ashtray in exchange for some things at the gas station while he's trying to make it home, of just like an ashtray device that has a top that collapses over the top of it, so this way no smoke gets released. Which, okay, that might make some money. It's not Gizmo money, but
Works great in theory if it worked.
yeah, because I don't know if it's like after a while, does the smoke just like settle and dissipate, or is it just like it has nowhere to go, so it's just going to remain in there? As a kid, we tried to bottle smoke once, and I think it just like lined the inside of a container, but it didn't do anything.
You did see what happened with that invention.
Oh,
right?
yeah, where it just like pours out once he opens it.
Yeah.
So, back to Dory's Tavern, where Kate is trying to serve all of the gremlins at once, which this is when we get goofy. Just for the fact that, like, we have the Flasher Gremlin, the Noir Gremlin, the Poker Game Gremlin, the Puppet Gremlin, Flashdance Gremlin. Like, this is when we start going crazy with all of the gremlins from there. But it's just like a fun little side from all of the other chaos that's going on. I love the Noir Gremlin of just them, like playing the, what was like the piano or whatever, and then it's just this one gremlin with a fedora sitting, like smoking a cigarette at a smoky table, and then you just see these two little hand puppets pop up next to him from the Puppet Gremlin.
I like how, I mean, she's tending this bar. We don't know how this, she just like, all of a sudden she saw gremlins and she's like, well, I guess I better serve them, right? Or we didn't see her start this, right?
Dory's Tavern can't afford a low star on Yelp. I mean, they're monsters, but Google reviews control us these days.
I know it's fun for the movie, but it's just fun to think like, yeah, these things were literally born yesterday, and they just know how like human life works, human society.
Well, I mean, we'll get into a little bit later, but it's these things were born yesterday, which is why, how do they know the lyrics to hi-ho, it's up? Like, that's what is just genetically ingrained in their psyche. So, after a while, Kate goes on the offensive. She's using the camera to fend off gremlins, and that's when Stripe escapes. And then Billy arrives with the car headlights. That way they're able to get out from there, which they get out as long as to, I think it's like get across the street, and then they're like, we should probably hide because like the car breaks down. So I love the whole like wild chaos of this town at night at like Christmas time, of everything just like going crazy and exploding and things on fire and in this quaint little town. I love the back end of this, which is why it's so weird to then give us this monologue from Phoebe Cates.
When this scene came up, I was thinking like, you know, in the sequel, it's so ridiculous. I can't believe they threw that kind of thing in there. And it's so stupid. And I forgot that the monologue in this movie hits completely different than the second one does.
Oh, yeah, because the second was just a parody of this one because everybody was like, that was dark.
Yeah.
So would anybody like to explain her story?
Oh, I figured you would just play it, but I guess it's kind of long.
It's decently long. The gist of it is she talks about they don't celebrate Christmas anymore because many years ago, her father was out for Christmas and it was the rest of the family at home. And then he didn't come home and they start smelling something. And then they finally end up having the people come in and they take a look at the chimney and they end up finding out the reason the father didn't come home is because the father was dressed as Santa with presents, tried to come down the chimney, slipped and snapped his neck, and his body has been decaying in their chimney. And that's why she doesn't celebrate Christmas.
Fucked up.
Yeah. It is the Gremlins version of the USS Indianapolis tale from Jaws. It's like, here's a weird thing to just really level set the intensity of the situation. Except it made sense in Jaws. It is a weird non sequitur in Gremlins.
Okay. Chimneys aren't that big, right? I mean, generally.
No. Any of the chimneys I've come across. Yeah. Well, he's a very, very thin man. Also, the fact that most chimneys I know have some sort of block at some point in it. It's not just like straight up empty from bottom to top. There's some sort of like cap to it. So it's weird that it's just Yep, nothing there. Because, like, what's preventing a bird from just flying down your chimney?
Well, that seems difficult.
So they end up leaving this sunny story alone so they can go to the theater to try to find where all these guys are.
Yeah, because the town's like empty after all the chaos.
Yeah. So they ended up finding him in the theater where they see all of them sitting and watching Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, which then gives them the idea of, since they're all here, let's blow the place up, essentially.
It's really the best choice.
It's the only way to be sure.
And then all of a sudden, like, as they're getting ready to blow it up, his dad calls and he's like, Billy, I forgot a fourth rule I should have mentioned. Fire only hardens them and makes them stronger. It turns them into one solid gremlin.
Now, is it the heat and fire that incinerates them, or is it the bright light from the explosion that fries them?
I don't know.
And is it a 1-2 punch where it fries them and then the heat like finishes the job?
It's like a stun grenade followed by the actual thermite.
Yeah.
I mean, if you had a UV flashlight, that would do it. I think they would die.
You would just need a really big one.
They said sunlight kills. They don't like bright light, but sunlight kills them.
What about that like 10,000 lumens flashlight that can light paper on fire?
Yeah.
That'd do it all right.
I mean, I think regardless of if that was bright enough to affect them, I think just the fact that it can light things on fire would work. Because at that point, it's essentially just like a laser. So they blow the theater up, which Stripe ends up escaping because he ends up running out of candy, looks across the street and sees a candy sign. So he runs out before the explosion, which...
So he didn't get out with his wit. It was just pure dumb luck.
Yeah. So it just kind of sheer happenstance. So they end up following and kind of tracking this down over into this... I don't even know what it is. It's kind of like a sporting goods type store because there's like a garden area, but then there's also like all of the sports goods, and there's like crossbows and chainsaws and baseball bats and all of these various things there. So it's almost like a mix between like a Home Depot and a Sears kind of thing. And I love the ongoing battle between him and Stripe throughout this, of Stripe attacking him with a chainsaw and then Stripe shooting him in the arm with a crossbow thing, and Kate trying to get the lights turned on so they can end up stopping this, and Gizmo thinking back to the Clark Gable movie he saw and hopping into his little hot rod to go after them. All of these things. It's a fun kind of combination of all of these pieces coming together for the climax of this, while still keeping Stripe kind of menacing overall, just for the fact that it's like him coming at somebody with a chainsaw, him coming at somebody with like a crossbow, straight up gun, is
he's got a gun.
More impressive than like I said, he's more impressive than Chucky in the first Child's Play movie in terms of like he's carrying a crossbow, a chainsaw, and a gun. So we end up having this kind of garden fountain that Stripe decides he's going to replicate himself in, which is when they end up ultimately defeating him through the power of lights and electricity and all of these various things, into the goopiest gremlin decay sequence that we've had so far. It's interesting that even his bones pulsed.
Yeah, it was pretty gross.
I mean, it's kind of cool that it's like, after doing the howling of like the werewolf effects in there, and then having a Joe Dante movie where they do this is probably just as impressive, of having the gremlin puppet that like is climbing out and moving around, and the bones are pulsing and the eye is like deflating and all of these things. The end. Other than they go back to the house now that all of the torment is done, and the old gentleman finally arrives after all of this stuff on TV, and he comes to reclaim Gizmo because they are not ready to have him, which I like how everybody's like, but Giz, you guys realized what you've done within 24 hours. Like, one rotation around this sun kind of deal, like of the earth kind of deal, and destroyed a town, multiple
They almost
dead.
brought upon the apocalypse.
Yeah, like your police force was, I think, 2 guys. They're probably dead. Their car flipped over. So I think Billy probably should just take the L and just give up Giz for a while and be like, you're right. Maybe I'll start with a goldfish, work my way up. We get the fun little matte painting of the old gentleman walking back out with Gizmo after Gizmo says his goodbyes, and everybody sees him off, and then he kind of walks off into the night of all of the moon over the town and what's left of it, and then we kick into that Gremlins theme song. And I gotta say, one of my favorite Christmas movies in general, just holiday season movies overall.
It's a Trey Bien movie.
Yes, it's
and it
3
teaches
BNs.
one of the biggest lessons that you can possibly do. Never give a pet as a Christmas gift.
That is very true. Never give a responsibility or burden to somebody when they do not have a say in it.
When they have failed as a comic artist and...
Well, no. Failure would imply that you succeeded at one point.
Or tried.
He
At least tried.
He hadn't gotten there yet. So he was still an aspiring artist. He wasn't a failure. He was still aspiring.
I love that shot. Sorry, just going back to when the mom turns around and all this, there's that imposing shot of grandfather standing there behind her looking like he just grabs her by the throat and raises her up. What have you
He just
done?
lays like one fast chop to the back of her neck and she goes down. Takes his cane out and just like hamstrings Rand.
I just keep thinking of that like very last scene in Dumb and Dumber where Lloyd grabs Harry's face. Like, do you realize what you've done?
Yeah.
So I guess as far as this, any other thoughts before we wrap this thing up?
This is one of those movies that I do watch at least once a year for Christmas time.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen it in quite a bit.
Well, I'm glad we can make you watch it again. So for anybody out there, feel free to watch it. Let us know what you think about it. We always want to hear, I mean, even aside from Gremlins, just in general, like your favorite holiday movies, stuff that you guys do around the December timeline. So thank you again for coming along for the adventure on Gremlins. As always, you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at Screen Refresh, or email us your own movie memories at screenrefresh@gmail.com. If you like the show, help us out and leave a rating or review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast to help others find us. That can be your holiday gift to us. For Tim, I'm Tim for Nick and Dean. Also, we'll see you again in a couple weeks on Rule of Thirds, and catch me on our other sister podcast, Don't Open This Podcast. Happy holidays.
Bye.
And scene.